Welcome to Jobshare podcast, the place for sharing everything we know about careers for the next generation. If you are an employer looking to grow your business through new talent, or a young person looking for honest advice on getting and succeeding in a job, then we're here for you. So let's get to it. I'm Charlie Black, and I'm joined here today by my most fabulous co-hosts, Katia Douglas and Natalie Parry. Hello friends and welcome to Jobshare podcast. Today we are joined by Leanne Honey, Equality and Diversity Champion and all-round awesome human being. Where I'd like to start, I think, because you, Leanne Honey, are our lovely guest today. What? And this is probably a difficult question, so I'm really sorry about that. But why are you qualified to talk to us about LGBT plus issues?
That is a difficult question. That is a really hard question. I suppose because I'm part of the community, that doesn't make me qualified, but it makes me have some lived experience of being part of the community, and obviously in a workplace as part of the community. I've done a lot of work with the LGBT community, whether that's in helping with events, raising awareness, lots of different training courses. Got my level 2 about LGBT inclusion in the workplace. So I guess that's a start really on there.
Yeah, no, that's cool. It wasn't supposed to it wasn't an interview question. I wasn't testing you for a job, but I just think it's important when people are listening in, they're going to want to know, hey, who are you? Why are you talking about this? And I think this one was really important for us to bring a guest in because we are all straight women, and for us we are absolutely allies, but we can't talk about lived experiences. So I think it's cool, and thank you so much for joining us because it will be awesome, and you are awesome, so we're super happy to have you. And guys, just jump in with questions. That's cool. Let's kick off with talking about the first half of our podcast is going to be about employers and how employers can create an inclusive culture, inclusive workplace and we do talk particularly about young people. And I know it's not just young people that are part of the LGBTQ plus community, but that's what our podcast is about. So that's what we're going to talk about. So how do you think, Leanne, because I know you work with young people as well in workplaces, that's part of your job. What can employers do to make their workplace more inclusive?
I think the key is always education. Educate yourself is the main bit. That's what I always say, because you need to have an awareness. Without having an education around the community, challenges, barriers that are faced, you're not going to know how to support someone. So the key is educate yourself, whether that's educating about who's part of the community, how to support them, awareness, again, like I said, about some of the barriers. That's the key. That is the key in there. And educate your staff as well. You can't always change everyone's views and opinions. That's never, you can't do that, but you can create an awareness and understanding to make it a more inclusive space. And also giving people the freedom to be themselves, because the more that you have that, the more of a safe space you're creating for people to share with you, and to, again, help build your understanding.
When you say educating people, educate yourself, that's really important. But what about those moments where you know that you're ignorant? How is the best way to approach that? So if you're talking to somebody and you know you're about to say something stupid or ignorant, or as an employer, as a manager, how would you suggest people should deal with that situation?
That is another good question. I think it's always okay to ask questions. If you don't know something, just ask. But it's about how you ask a question, I think, is most probably key. Think about how you're coming across and why you're asking that question.
Yeah.
Is it something you need to know? Do you need to know what someone's biological sex was when they was born? Most probably not. But do you need to know what pronouns someone wants to use? Most probably. Or why pronouns are important? That's, again, if you don't know something, then asking is fine, but it's about how you ask the question and why you're asking that question as well. Or also research. There's so much out there. Like Stonewall are great for supporting workplaces, for being more inclusive, and they put this, there's so many different guides, information, advice on Stonewall to gain support for employers who are just not sure what they should or shouldn't say or should or shouldn't do as well. I think that's the key, but it is okay to ask questions in the right way, just thinking about how you're coming across.
And asking questions to actually educate yourself rather than just because you want to be nosy about a situation or something. I think it's a different, that's different, isn't it? Asking questions to educate yourself is different.
Exactly that. Like, I've worked in a workplace before, and I think some of the questions that have been asked most probably haven't been the most appropriate questions. And I really don't need to know what they're asking me about why I'm bisexual, but it's the questions I've asked haven't been the most appropriate or done in the right way. Like you said, it's been more they're being nosy and trying to gossip or find out something because they're curious about it, but not because they actually want to build their understanding and help support you in the workplace.
So don't be a knob.
Yeah.
Like, do it because you want to create an inclusive work environment, not because you are curious.
No,
the internet is what that's for.
Exactly.
Google is free, people.
It is.
Google is
research
free.
It's always good to research, and there's so much training out there, and there's so much free training as well. It's definitely worth looking into if you're a complete novice to anything about the LGBTQ plus community. It would never hurt to do more research and training than there. Definitely.
You mentioned it, and I really want to talk about it. Can we talk about pronouns, please?
Yeah.
Because I think it's a really interesting topic. It's a really, really, I was going to swear then, important topic. Why do you think identifying your pronouns when you meet somebody is important?
My main reason why I think it's important is there's a couple of reasons. I think the main one is letting people know that you're aware of the importance of pronouns, and that you're aware that I always find, I know I've said loads of times before, if I see someone's pronouns in like their bio on something, automatically that's telling me they're aware of pronouns, the importance of them, and likely are maybe a trans ally and supports trans rights potentially. And it's also opening that up to someone who maybe someone uses they them pronouns, and that might be opening up to them to share that with you and say, these are my pronouns. It's like automatically starting that safe space, being inclusive. And yeah, I think it's just I've lost my words. It's gone.
No, that's fine. So it's I think what you were saying in terms it was that by stating your own pronouns, you're creating a space for people to feel like it's okay to say, well, my pronouns are they, them, or she, her, or whatever they like to use.
Exactly that. Yeah. It's almost being aware. It's trying to be more inclusive and opening up that space. It's always about creating a safe space where people feel safe to share with you.
Because it must be really awful if someone's being called by the wrong pronouns and doesn't feel confident enough or comfortable enough to have that conversation, especially in a workplace.
Yeah.
You know,
it makes all the difference to someone. And that could be if someone used your wrong pronouns, that could be such a trigger that could make someone feel really dysphoric, it's called. It could trigger them. To use the right pronouns is so validating to someone as well. And it's just so important, especially in the workplace, especially if you're maybe working with external customers as well. So then they're using the right pronouns, if they hear you using the right pronouns. And also, say if someone doesn't know that someone's trans and you kept misgendering them or using the wrong pronouns, that could be quite dangerous for their safety as well. There's so many reasons, but definitely to make them feel validated and it's respectful. Like if I use one of your names wrong or pronouns wrong, I'd automatically correct myself because that's what we do. So it's important to do that for someone who's trans as well, that maybe uses pronouns like they, them, that you might not be as familiar with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think I only recently, I think we've had a conversation about this already, Deanna, but I only kind of recently went, okay, that's why I should use pronouns. I didn't feel, this is my own ignorance coming out, but I was like, well, I'm a cis woman, clearly a cis woman, and that's how I identify. So why do I need to tell people what my pronouns are? And it wasn't until somebody said to me, it's not about you, it's about everybody else.
Yeah.
And it's about creating that, them knowing that you're comfortable to have that conversation and that it's okay for them to say to you, my pronouns are this, and that's what I'd like you to use. So that was quite an important thing. And I think there are definitely some employers out there that have picked that up. I don't think it's enough. No. I've gone back to uni, and so I've done tons of lectures in a very short space of time. And some lecturers just come in and they come into the Zoom room and they say hi, and they talk to you. And some of them say, and there was one of them that really sticks in my mind, and she came on and she said, hi, my name's Kat, my pronouns are she, her. And I was like, that's how people everyone should introduce themselves. Because if everybody does that, then
it's normal.
It's normal. It's not
normal,
weird.
Whatever normal.
Yeah, whatever.
But yeah, it's just, it'd be lovely if it was just standard practice, because think how much of anxiety that would eliminate for someone who feels that they do have to introduce their pronouns to people who use the correct pronouns. Like, that would be eliminated. It would just we would just do it as standard practice, and it wouldn't be odd or different to do that. And you wouldn't have to explain to someone what a pronoun is and why it's important.
And even as an employer, how much talent are you missing out on because you're not making yourself inclusive?
Definitely. Yeah.
It's got to be a big deal, hasn't it?
Yeah. I wouldn't work somewhere that wasn't LGBTQ plus inclusive. I don't think. If they were very vocally, very clearly not supportive or not even willing to like learn or educate, then I don't think I'd want to work there or buy something from somewhere that makes sense. Customers go to somewhere where they've got the same morals, values as you. Like, I like to go to places that I know have the same values and morals as maybe I do. And if someone was clearly not being supportive, I most probably would avoid giving my money to them, because why would I do that?
And it doesn't take long for word of mouth to spread, does it? You know, Kat, you're in marketing, you know all about this.
Yeah,
word
absolutely.
of mouth is so important.
I think equally as well, though, like with you saying about the LinkedIn thing, I have seen an increase in that recently. Like a lot more people are sort of having their pronouns on their profiles. And I think, like, say if somebody was coming for an interview with you and they looked at your LinkedIn and they seen that, I think if there were somebody who did want to sort of say these are my pronouns but wouldn't normally feel comfortable with you, they probably would straight away, because you're sort of an advocate for that, as it were. So I think social media can go a long way for people to be able to see what kind of influence companies have and how they feel towards the LGBTQ plus community. Sorry, I didn't want to miss any letters out there.
Because we're inclusive. We don't want
yeah. So I think things like that do help as well for people to see, like, actually this person is very inclusive, and obviously the company must be if it's on their business profile. So yeah, and I have seen an increase, strangely. I don't know if it's just because I'm getting more connection requests recently than I have done before, but a lot of people's profiles have their pronouns on. So
there's definitely been an increase and an awareness of it over the last.
Isn't there a badge that people have on their profile picture? There's like a badge that you can have your pronouns on. I'm sure I've seen something like that.
Is there?
Like a filter thing, like
I want a badge.
Oh, the filter around like
like your actual
picture.
Profile picture, yeah. And then
it have some. I think.
Yeah, I think it's a green. For some reason. I know obviously it is LGBTQ plus awareness month this month, isn't it? So
Pride month,
Pride month. So yeah, for everybody, all the colours. We've obviously done a lot on the company in terms of that, but that's probably why I've seen it more.
Yeah, quite possibly. There's definitely more of an awareness, and I think a lot of makes me feel old saying this, but a lot of younger generations as well now are becoming a lot more aware, and I feel like there's so much more inclusive. I think like the learners I work with now, if I think about who I worked with, it would have been like 10 years ago, it's such a change. If I tried to speak about anything like this 10 years ago to some of my learners, I would have got such a mixed reaction and a lot of maybe defensiveness. It would be quite uncomfortable compared to now. It's I feel that there has definitely been a shift.
I think there's more conversation now, though, isn't it? And I know you joked earlier about saying about you wouldn't want to work for employers that didn't support the community, but I also think as well it's challenging those behaviors and making that conversation that sort of starts that movement of people talking about these things. Like it takes for somebody to stand up, doesn't it, and say I'm not okay with this, or I'm not comfortable with this, and I'm not saying that it's the responsibility to change people on their opinions, but I think the conversation in those environments still, even if, like you say, you're not going to change everyone's opinion, that even if you change one person's opinion in the room, it was worth it. So I think, I do think there is that element of the more that we talk about these things, the more that people feel comfortable, the more open and the better and more valid conversations we have about it.
Yeah. And not shying away from talking about it as well. Yeah. Like Leanne was saying, asking questions if you don't know, that's cool. I think what I get equally frustrated by is people's silence. Silence is not the same as being supportive or being anti-homophobic or for not calling people out about their behavior is just as bad as it to me, and just letting that happen is awful.
I think that's where our allies come in as well, because quite often if you're part of the community and maybe you're not out, maybe you don't feel safe like talking about your sexuality or your gender identity, so we need people who are allies who feel like they can stand up and say this isn't right, or I'm going to do this, I'm going to put my pronouns, even though actually like you said, you didn't realize it why before, but now you're like, actually I'm going to do that because it makes it easier for someone else, or it makes it more inclusive. So I think definitely speaking up if your allies as well and you feel safe to do so. If you're part of the community and you feel safe to speak up and address something that isn't right, is always great as well. Definitely.
Yeah. So I'm going to be looking out for pronouns. But I do. I look to people. I look for, when I'm looking for potential people I want to work with or partner with in my business practices, you look for people that have shared values, and this is exactly what Kat was saying. And it's not just about your customers. Your customers buy from you because you have values that they appreciate and they also value. But it's the same with business partners and potential suppliers. I look for people. I was looking for a coach, and one of the reasons that I selected my coach was, well, A, she's awesome, but B, she had her pronouns. So before I knew anything about her, she had her pronouns, and I felt like this is somebody who gets it. This is someone I know I can have conversations with. Just from that.
Yeah. Exactly. That is important, definitely. The same, obviously, with I'm very open about having counselling because I think it's amazing and everyone should do it all the time. The same with my counsellor. She put that just her awareness around the LGBTQ plus community, and that she was LGBTQ plus friendly, and I don't think I would have gone to her otherwise, especially at the time when I found her as my counsellor. Like, that was so important, and it does make the world of difference. It really does. Definitely,
it does. So we touched on the fact that it's Pride Month.
It is.
And we love Pride Month because it's massive celebration. It's a time to really shout about, being inclusive and supportive and being who you are and being all colours of the rainbow, being amazing. But, Pride Month is 1 month of the year, right? And there's a lot of people, lots of companies in particular, they get on board for a month and then never talk about it again.
Yeah.
It's not Christmas, it's something that affects people's lives all day, every day. So what kind of everyday things can employers, doesn't have to be it could be a business or maybe just a manager who wants to make a difference. What everyday things can people do to be inclusive and talk about things?
I think sometimes it's really little things. So like for myself personally, I've had before, not where I work now, but I have had before like very gendered questions like, oh, have you got a boyfriend, or have you got a husband, or have you got this? Don't ask that. Have you got a partner? You even need to ask that, but if you just feel like you need to,
why does that make a difference?
You don't need to gender it. Also, lost my train of thought again, but not gendering it. You don't need to gender that. You don't need to gender that question. And if someone is using, say, oh yeah, I went out with my partner, or they using they to describe their partner, don't push them to find out who their partner is, what gender their partner is, because maybe they don't want to share. Maybe they just happen to be using partner and they, but they might not want to share that with you. I think that's one little thing I can think of from my own experience.
Is it the same with children? Like, don't ask questions like,
yeah,
when are you going to have children?
Yes, exactly that. I've had that question too. But yeah, definitely exactly that. You just don't, it's just not needed. It really isn't.
Do we say that question to men? Or do we just say that to women?
Well, we're not going to debate feminist issues today, but yes, that's exactly what happens. I am all ready to have that conversation with you.
Can't let that go without saying that.
Yeah, I am. I'm trying to find the stats now. I wrote it down and I'll have to scrabble around on my piece of paper.
2 hours later.
I can't find the stat now. Okay, but I think you can probably make right. So we were talking about leadership, and we were talking about it started off as a gender gap analysis, men in leadership, women in leadership, and then we started having a conversation about transgender leadership. And I can't think of, and I hope I'm not about to embarrass myself, but I can't think of an openly trans business leader.
Depends what business you're talking about, I guess.
I know one person who owns their own company who is trans.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that.
Yeah.
I think it depends.
And very open about it. And like with you was saying about questions, because because she was so open about the fact that she was trans in her transition, like you could ask those questions that you want to ask because you're inquisitive and you want to know, without offending her, because obviously she was the one who had obviously instigated the conversation. So for me, it was quite refreshing because I had the opportunity to ask those questions you want to ask that you probably wouldn't in a normal setting if you didn't know somebody. So yeah, it was quite educational. And she's very open about it, and she's got a partner who she's been with for a lot of years who went with her through the transition, and she's got a daughter, and our partner's got a daughter. Yeah, and they've got a successful business. So yeah, I do. But
and that's awesome.
But I do know what you mean. It isn't something that you come across very often.
But it also could be, but also you might not know.
Yeah,
someone could know stealth and just are stealth and are not open about that. But I suppose it also depends on the organisation. I could think of at least one trans-related organisation where the director is trans.
Yeah, I mean that makes total sense.
Yeah, but I think it does depend, and it does depend. Like I do know people who are stealth who are not openly trans, so it does completely depend. But I would say the percentage is most probably a lot lower.
It's going to be tiny. They did tell me in my lecture, and I obviously couldn't write it down fast enough, so I will go back and look it up because it's something I actually quite fancy writing an essay about, to be honest. But the notion of if you can't see it, you can't be it, and if businesses, employers, organizations are making the effort to promote, to represent, yes, have representation.
That was my next point. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Well, yeah, have representation, like definitely, like exactly what you said. If you can't see yourself, then yeah, it's so important. Have representation, definitely, on there. And also, I think I was actually on training session. I think it was yesterday. I've done a lot of training this week, actually. I think it was yesterday, and someone on there was talking about exactly what you said, Charlotte, about Pride Month's great to raise awareness, also think about why there's a Pride Month, then also celebrate on some of it as well. But companies do just jump on that as almost like a promotion tool to make money, and that's not okay. It's not okay to profit on someone else's challenges, things that they've struggles that they face, their oppression. Like that's not okay. And it's about speaking all the time about it, keeping that up, not just at Pride Month say, oh, look at us, we're supportive.
I think that's quite transparent though. You can kind of see those companies that have got the banners for this month sometimes, who I've never spoke about, and I think it has almost the opposite effect.
I can think of one in particular that I won't mention, but I've seen a lot of over the last couple of weeks.
And tell us later.
Yeah, that actually, and it's causing a lot of controversy actually, because it is very much a profit, a advertising ploy to kind of gain some more business, and that isn't what you need from a company. You want someone throughout consistently is supportive and inclusive to their staff and their customers throughout, not just through June.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's not just your staff, is it? It's beyond that. It's your customers, it's your suppliers. It has to run. Everything. It has to be something you truly, truly value. And if you don't, then I highly suggest you find someone that does in your business.
Yeah, definitely.
It's important. It really is. Cool. Anything anyone else wants to say about employers?
I'm sure there was more, but I think I went on the tangent.
I think the only other thing I would say is I think it goes further when we're thinking about employers and how we think about employers. You know, we think about the likes of our employer or whoever it is we work for, but I think it goes further than that when you start to look at things like sport. So like when you look at like football, and obviously the NFL recently had the first gay playing NFL player to come out. I
saw it just before this.
I think it goes further. When we think of employers, we need to be thinking about also big organizations who work with huge, across the world, huge audiences, and how much difference they could make if
like the reach is so much bigger, isn't it?
They were more inclusive, and clearly it is an inclusive environment, because we're 2021 and the first NFL player playing to come out is now. That's just crazy.
The thing as well,
is crazy,
it's
and it's
when
one.
they retire.
One.
And it's one person.
And I mean, it doesn't happen in football either. Obviously, football is huge into international sport across the world. So I think when we think about employers, we must think about actual organisations, as a whole, and how people, in those organisations need to do better to make their employees, because they are their employees, feel more comfortable.
If an especially a big organisation, ever says something like, "Oh, we don't have any LGBTQ plus staff" or anything like that, it's most probably, most ridiculous.
That's the end of
it. They will, and you're right. Definitely, bigger names need to get involved, especially sports, and like certain sports, such as football. There's so much stigma still behind. If you're a gay man, for example, there's so much stigma that needs to stop.
I don't like football, right? Nat does, so we balance each other out, right? So don't come at me, listeners. Okay, I don't like football. There's lots of reasons I don't like football. It's not really the game. It's kind of everything else that goes with it and the business. But that's for another day. But one of the reasons I get really upset about football is because you cannot tell me there is not a gay football player. I do not believe you. Statistically, that cannot be a thing, or or a gay linesman or a ref or a coach, whatever. Can't be a thing. But nobody comes out because it's not an inclusive and accepting environment. And the knock-on of that, they have such powerful influence over the fans, again, their suppliers, those companies that endorse them. Well, whatever, advertising. Sponsors. Yeah, cool. And I have had conversations with businesses about being more inclusive, and I've talked to them about just the little things like using pronouns and the attitude. And they are small businesses I'm talking about here, well, small to medium businesses, and it's kind of like, why would we do all that for such a small minority of people? And I find that really frustrating, and they don't see it as something of importance or of value. But if big organizations, if football or big sporting events took that on board and ran with it and properly promoted inclusion, that would have a knock-on effect for other businesses, other employers, and then perhaps those smaller guys that think it's not their duty would pick up that mantle. And sorry, that was a little rant.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it might have been a few years back now. I can't really remember, but I think some football teams football teams, didn't they do a campaign and they wore like rainbow laces? Did this happen at some point?
The Premier League did a rainbow laces as part of a support of, I think it was last Pride Month, in fact.
Was it? I was going to say,
well, that obviously worked really well, didn't it?
Yeah, but I don't know if that. I don't know if lots of people got involved, but it was stuff. But you're right, it's big names, and even like the media and celebrities. And I think some of the change is there are a lot more celebrities now being a lot more open and talking about it, and being more. I can't think what I want to say, but also like even things like Little Mix and their support for the LGBTQ plus community, and that's quite important, because then I know like my goddaughter absolutely adores Little Mix, and that means she's quite young, she's 6, and that's great already. It's starting them
if that acceptance can start as early as possible, then it becomes a non-issue.
Like the schools have such a responsibility. I know that's off the topic from employers, but schools have such a responsibility around education, but in the right way. I always have this debate with my housemate about how I think it's really important to speak to children from when they're young about, for example, we talk about sexuality, but you pick the right way to speak about it. You make it age appropriate. Like my goddaughter, she is just such a beautiful little girl, and she knows that. She always says, so for example, girls can like girls and boys can like boys, and you can like whoever you like, and it's never awkward or uncomfortable. It's age appropriate. And when we speak to her, like, oh, is there anyone you like at school? Like, just little things. And schools have a big responsibility for teaching our younger generation, because they'll get more acceptance and understanding. Because a lot of the time, hate or unacceptance is lack of knowing, the fear of the unknown, like not knowing what it means to be gay or to be trans or non-binary or whatever you identify as.
I do think young people are a lot more interested now in lots of different things. They're much more inquisitive, aren't they, about wanting to understand. And even from kind of when I was at school, like it was like yesterday. So like, but even from then,
time ago now, my love.
Yeah. even with the young people that we work with, obviously I've been here for sort of 9 years now, and even over that time, the difference in their understanding and their
I think people are more open now because like the world has changed, hasn't it? So like even when I was a kid, like one of my friends was gay and he was going to come out to his mom and he was absolutely petrified, and it took him ages. But I think now it's not as difficult because it's more spoken about and people are more aware of it, that it's not sort of like a taboo subject. I'm not saying it's any easier now for a kid to come out, I'm not saying that, but in society is more accepting than I would say 10 years ago. Like people were just not willing to talk about it at all. It was just, no, I don't want to talk about this. Whereas now I think people are a bit more forthcoming and a bit more open and want to ask questions and the right questions. Not just, I don't believe in that, I don't want to talk about it. Because that is what you got. That was the response. So I think it's nice to see that there has been a shift and change, so it's a bit easier for people. I'm not saying it's easy at all, but it's, in terms of society, I would definitely say that people are a lot more accepting and understand, and they know about it. That's what it is. It's because it wasn't spoken about. So if you don't talk about something, you don't know, do you? So just being uneducated.
And I think definitely, like, so a good comparison is a bit of my lived experience, I guess. So when I come out, I don't really, kind of gradually, I'm not really sure what to call it, but I didn't come out to everyone because I almost had, I called it bi privilege, because for a while I was married to a man and I didn't need to come out to all my family because they didn't need to know. So I didn't hide it from them. I just didn't tell them. And then my husband and I broke up and I started dating, and I've been dating predominantly women. I thought, okay, I maybe need to tell them now because they're going to find out. But anyhow, my brother actually asked me. He's a lot younger than me, and I was a bit worried about how he'd react. And actually, I'm like, he was still at school at the time, and I remember him saying, like, are you worried that you'll get picked on or people say stuff? And he was like, no, because I'll just tell him that they're wrong and you're my sister. And he was very good. He's always been really understanding about it, which is great. And now he has a lot of friends who are part of the community as well. And it's just lovely. It's lovely to see that. But then with some of my relatives, I'm very fortunate with my coming out, and no one's like disowned me or anything like that. I think some of my family, it'd be fair to say, don't understand. They don't get it. It's been difficult. They are likely not going to see this, so I can say this. So they have openly said that they don't really understand it or necessarily agree, but they love me and they'll always love me, and that's the best outcome. But this is usually from people who are a bit older generations.
I think as well, it can be really hard for somebody to come out if you're coming from a family home where there's religion and the religion's really strong. So like I used to have somebody who worked for me who came from a Muslim family, and his family pretty much disowned him when he came out. He was still
God, I nearly said his name then. I nearly went, is that? And no, right, okay.
He still was very close to his sister, but his mum spoke to him and wanted something to do with him, but it was behind his dad's back. So that situation for him was really, really hard. And his friends became his family because he didn't have his family anymore. I mean, he was the happiest person you'll ever meet, and literally water off a duck's back, anything. He wasn't bothered by a single thing. Obviously that would have massively affected him, but he was such a positive person, and he just didn't let it bring him down. And it was like, well, this is my life now and I'm happy and I'm fine. So it's their loss, not mine.
Yeah, exactly. And you think you have to do that in a way. And we call that your chosen family. There is a word for it. So we say chosen family. So I've got people who are like my chosen family. They're my friends, but then they're more than friends. They are like my family. Yeah. But it is really hard, but I think you have to do that. It's almost like, I remember when I told my nan, that was she was the last one I told. It was a massive deal, and I cried when I told her, and she was like, okay, she's getting used to it. But I had to do exactly that. I had to just go, right, this is yours now. I've told you this. This isn't my secret anymore. This isn't, if you're not okay with it, that's yours. And I'm just living my life. I'm being me, and so on. And she's getting better. She did meet my girlfriend last year, and it went okay.
So is that what you would say you would do then? So if you have those family members who aren't accepting or aren't understanding, do you have to just like let that go, I suppose?
It is hard. And I think everyone's coming out and everyone's view on it is so individual. And it will depend. I know some people who have completely just cut off their family and don't speak to them at all because they're not accepting. I know some people who still have contact and they might still use the wrong pronouns if they're trans, for example, or use their dead name or the birth name, but they'll still have that because they still want their family around. I think
it's so hard, isn't it?
It is so hard. And it took, I was really upset about my nan. She dealt with it much better than most probably a lot of people's relatives do. But it was hard to know that maybe that's not fully accepted, or things like when she would say, oh, are you seeing your friend today? Oh, that's another thing for employers, don't refer to someone's partner if they're the same sex as their friend. That's that's a great thing. And that was really hard to kind of get my head around, but I think I don't know, I was able to do that, but everyone might not be able to do that. So individual,
but it's still, and that's your family. There's still situations where complete strangers are just they're evil, they're horrible people. Violence against the community is huge, and it's scary, and as employers, not having a zero tolerance policy on that has to be is a must. And it's more than just an HR policy. It's more than just saying we will discipline anybody who doesn't follow our inclusion policy, our E&D policy. It's more than that. It is being a proper ally and
definitely and
advocating,
because things like that do still happen, and they do still happen in the workplace. Like it's shocking. I can remember a workplace I worked at before. There was a member of staff who said a really offensive, I'm not going to say it, but said a really offensive term about someone who they perceived as being trans. And I called them out on it because that's me, and I'm very much a trans ally, and I feel safe and confident to do that. And I've done it in the right way. I tried to educate first, because again, I'm a firm believer of education. Maybe just they don't know it's a bad term to use. The response I got was, well, I know someone is trans and they let me use that word. That's not the best, not the best reason. It doesn't work that way. And I took it to the employer and nothing was ever done about it. In my book, a bit of context, this person was telling a young person that this is what they call this person. It wasn't good. I think that there should have been real firm disciplinary action there, but then nothing ever happened. And that was only, I don't even know how many years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I reckon. And that's things like that, I'm sure, happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and worse, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. And I've had people say to me before, "Oh, you're just being sensitive to it."
Oh, I get that.
Yeah.
People say that.
Oh, you're reading into it.
Yeah. Why is it so important to you? You know, and I think, why is this not important to you? Let's talk about why this is so unimportant to you. Right, so we're going to move on then, and we're going to talk about young people in the workplace. It's not necessarily about young people who identify as LGBTQ+, but also allies as well, and how they can promote inclusion within the workplace. So let's start with how you can be an ally as a young person, and you're at work. What can you do to be an ally?
I think a good thing is to stand up for something you don't think is right. And a bit like what I said earlier, I feel that's really important, especially as allies. Like, again, the person that maybe is being discriminated against or has a hate crime or anything like that, they might not have the confidence to stand up and say this isn't right. So I think standing up if you feel safe to do so. So if you're in the workplace, following your reporting process, if there's a problem, maybe speaking to HR or your manager, whoever you feel comfortable speaking with, is a really important part. And I think it's very similar to what we were speaking about earlier, like pronouns as well. It's really important. Just having an awareness and understanding, not just during Pride Month, but throughout consistently. Definitely. What else as a young person? I think, trying to think how my brother's supportive as he is a young person, and how he's supportive how he was to me. Just showing that it's okay if someone comes out to you, just being okay with it, like not making it a thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I've had different reactions, and it's always a bit of a, I always talk to my friends about it. Oh yeah, I had that look. So some people have a look when you come out with them, and you can see the panic almost on their face. Like, it's a thing. It is a thing. It's almost like, I don't know, oh my goodness, what do I do with this information? And just trying to just make someone feel comfortable. But there is this panicked look. So trying to work on that. But then I've had some people, like actually it was a few weeks ago at work, I realised I was just speaking in a meeting with someone. I realised they don't know that I'm bi, and they don't know I was dating a woman. And I just happened to say her. And as soon as I said it, like my head went, oh my goodness, like they don't know. But there was no panic. There was nothing. It was just, it wasn't a thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Totally normal. It wasn't, oh my goodness, Leanne's female and she's just said she's dating someone that's a woman. There wasn't any like that. It was just completely normal. It wasn't a question like, oh, I didn't know you were bi. Oh, you date women. And it was just normal.
It was just like, okay, move on.
So I think and I think a lot of young people most probably be better at that than some of us sometimes.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, actually. And maybe that's something you can do as a young person, is to reverse mentor. So to educate your boss or your, or other people in the organization. Yeah. And to be able to say, particularly if you're aware that somebody's part of the community in the workplace, and just being able to teach, to educate. That is going to be the theme of today's podcast.
Educate.
Absolutely. Make yourself, let's remove the ignorance from the equation. So if you can reverse mentor, if you can speak up and you can teach, teach people and create an environment, then that's super cool. But what should you do as a young person if something happens and you're uncomfortable with it?
Definitely speak up to somebody you feel comfortable with. I know, like I said about following the process, but I think only if you feel comfortable following that process.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that you should be able to go to anybody in the workplace and speak to them. So if something happened and you felt uncomfortable, and Natalie, if you were just my colleague, but I felt safe speaking to you, I think finding someone that you feel safe and comfortable speaking to let them know, and don't be worried if further action needs to be taken, because that's important, whether that action is to educate that member of staff or whoever it was that's done something to make you feel uncomfortable, or if it's to take further action depending on the severity of the situation. I think another thing to be aware, slight side note to that, is in the workplace, I suppose this is for employers, is be aware that sometimes the member of staff who said something that's made someone feel uncomfortable or upset maybe really didn't realise that wasn't okay. And I think being aware of that is really important, because again, education, that's the theme, is so important. Obviously it depends on the level of what it was.
Yeah, I suppose if you go too far the other way as a workplace, and it's, if you say anything out of turn or anything anyone perceives as offensive, then you will be disciplined. It then stops the conversation in its entirety.
Exactly. Yeah, you need that freedom I think again is education. That is the key. People need to know, otherwise they're not going to know. There's a lot of very outdated terms that most probably were okay before to say, that really, really are not okay to say now, or should never have been okay to say in the first place. And maybe someone just doesn't know, and benefit of the doubt, speak. Were you aware this was not okay? But I think as a young person, if you feel uncomfortable, just speaking to someone, letting them know. Obviously you've got external places you can get advice from if you're really not feeling supported in the workplace, because sometimes maybe even you could go up to a top manager somewhere and they might still not do anything about it. The right external places as well.
So what external places can people go to?
Well, you've got obviously places like some of the more generic places like ACAS or Citizens Advice. They're great for things like that as well, if you want like workplace specific advice around laws, legislation, which would come under. But you've got some more specific ones. So I mentioned Stonewall already. They're really great website for if you're part of the community or an ally or just want to learn more. That's really good. I know obviously I'm from Ipswich, we've got a lot of local places, and a lot of towns and cities will have their own local like support network or support groups that you can join. So for example, if you're a young person, outreach, youth, I think they've got lots of places all over that you can join and be part of and get advice from. You've also got, so if you're 19 and under, if we're talking about young people, Mermaids Trust is a charity that do a lot of work with the trans community, with trans individuals who are 19 and under, but also families and friends as well. Really good. I've got a list somewhere. I had to put a list down so I remembered. There's so many. There is a lot.
But isn't that lovely that there's that many? There is so much out there.
There is, and it's about finding some of the right places as well. So one I was going to mention as well is if you feel that you've experienced like a hate crime or domestic abuse, so it's called Gallup, but they're really good if you wanted to get more advice around that, how you whether you wanted to report it or didn't, or needed some support around that as well. And also just to note, a hate crime is a hate crime, if you perceive it as a hate crime, and it's a hate crime as well. So even if you're like not sure if it's a hate crime, then if you feel it is, then you can report it, and you can report witnessing one as well on there. Also gendered intelligence, so they support trans people who are 25 and under as well. We're talking about young people.
Cool. So there are places out there.
Yeah.
I think, social media and the internet can be a very dark place, but it also can be a place where people can find their light, and some of that is being able to find these organizations. I went somewhere lovely yesterday that was their mental health therapy center, and they were telling me that they have a support group because one of the things that they specialize in is gender identity. So they said they have a support group for, and it's very local to me, so it's not for everyone, but I'm sure that lots of places have got them. And this woman was saying to me, I go to this group every week. She's a therapist that supports the group, and she said never once have actually in the group situation have they spoken about being trans. And they but being able to be young people and be somewhere where they feel so included, they're just making friends and being around other people. And I think, well, you tell me, I imagine that feeling of isolation is the hardest one to deal with.
Yeah, I think so. I've had through the years different people that I care about who are trans, and having a support group or some kind of safe space, you'll hear that a lot. I'm sure you've probably heard that term, but a safe space where you can just be yourself, and it isn't about being trans or whatever the support group is for, but you can just be yourself and not feel constant on edge. So I think, for example, being trans, like just being out in a social situation can be so stressful and so anxiety inducing. Are people going to perceive you as your gender? Are they going to misgender you? Are they going to use the right pronouns? What happens when you have to go to the bathroom? Like things that myself as a cis woman takes for granted every single day. So to have somewhere, a safe space where it's just not a thing. It's just, you can just be yourself is so changing. I've been to a lot of different groups as well. And you're right, it's not always about being trans or being bi or being gay or whatever it is. It's just being
human.
Just being here, being yourself and expressing yourself exactly how you want to express yourself. And having no fear of judgment, of hate crime, of your safety in a lot of cases.
Yeah. I'm going to backtrack if everybody doesn't mind, but just to go back to an employer point, something an employer can do, and you raised the issue. Really, it doesn't seem like a big issue to us, but gender neutral toilets, like they can make such a big difference to people. Not to mention cut like wait times massively, but things don't need to be a gender. No. You don't need to fit into a nice binary box with a pink or blue bow on it. That's not something that has to happen. No. So where you can create those spaces.
Definitely.
I really detest being addressed with a feminine title. I hate that anyway, but
and it's presumptuous as well. You shouldn't ever presume anything. Definitely. No. I think gender neutral, so employers, you could definitely have gender neutral toilets. I think so. When I went to Brighton, I love Brighton, a lot of the bars there would have gender neutral toilets, and it's just fine. Like it's absolutely fine. But if you don't have gender neutral toilets, letting people choose which toilet they want to go into, I think is key. Say, for example, if you had someone who's non-binary, whichever toilet they feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be a thing. If you feel like you need to have a conversation, if someone comes out to you as maybe non-binary, and you have a comment, it's whatever they feel comfortable with, let them lead that, and it actually doesn't impact anybody. It really doesn't impact anybody else. It is a toilet. At the end of the day, I know there's always a lot of controversy from people who are not trans inclusive about toilets and safety, but actually it's very silly. It's all
Show
I
me the data.
Yeah,
you know, there's no data to support that argument. That is just, it's hyperbole, isn't it? It's just
I think the other thing I wanted to kind of just touch on really was we're talking about kind of young people. That's obviously what our podcast is always around. And one thing that I'm interested to know, and I'm hoping you have some information on it, is as a parent. So as a parent who has a child that's going through a transition or whatever it might be, that maybe you aren't educated enough to understand, or that you're struggling with, which I'm sure does happen. Are there places out there that support that, and can we talk about that?
Yeah, so there definitely are. So say, for example, if you have a child who has started transition, maybe come out as trans, like either transgender, non-binary, so on. So Mermaids is a really great one, and they do a lot of work with family and friends as well. If you didn't feel confident speaking to someone, again, they have a lot of support and information on their website as well, and that's for young people 19 and under and their family and friends. One of the reasons it's a positive thing, so can I name drop a company if it's positive?
Yeah. We do you know what, right? Nobody's sponsoring us right now, so you can drop all you want.
Starbucks I think it was last year, or maybe the beginning of this year. I get Starbucks a lot. I'm not gonna lie, I love coffee. But Starbucks done a big charity campaign, like raising money for mermaids, actually, which is really good. But they're quite a big a charity around supporting young people who are trans and their family and friends. If you've maybe got a relative or friend who's come out as maybe gay or lesbian, bi, there is another one. It's on my list. It's FLAG, I think, but I'm trying to remember what it stands for. Families and Friends of Lesbian and Gay People. So they've got a good website as well to support parents, families, friends, if you've come out too, which is quite good.
I think they're really important, aren't they? Because that's a big part of that person's how that when that goes through, when they come out, or whether they're trans, having that family support network must be huge. But at the same time, maybe they don't understand, or maybe they and
maybe they need some support. It's a big change, especially if you're not familiar with it. So if I think back to when I come out to my mum, she's gonna hate me for saying this. So when I come out to my mum, I must have been like 21 at the time, and she was one of the first people I come out to. And she was so upset. She was upset. She cried, and her first response was, "But I want grandkids." And I was like, "Well, Mum, one,
I can still have babies."
I don't know who I'm gonna end up having as my life partner, but whoever it is, if I want kids, I can still have kids. And also if I don't want kids, that's okay too. But my mum didn't really know anyone who was part of the LGBTQ plus community. She grew up in a very small village. Her dad was a police officer in many years when it was not okay to be gay. She just didn't understand, and she was really upset. But she's raised her awareness now. She's a different person. I'm sure she has her moments, but she is a different person in that she is very supportive. She will be inclusive. She's met my girlfriend that I had last year, and she actually invited her over for like my birthday barbecue, which sounds like such a little thing, but to me it was a massive deal. She literally messaged me and said, would she like to come? Yes, that'd be great. And she's built that awareness. But I think to begin with, it can be a bit of a shock. And doing research or having some place you can go and get support is a really important thing for parents as well. And if you have a child that comes out of trans, that can cause a lot of emotions. I've heard of a lot of parents feel like they're grieving, like they've lost a child, lost their daughter, their son. And there's a lot of feelings to process around there. And to realise that your memories are still there. They're still the same person. They're just living their truth.
Yeah.
They're being themselves. And I think getting support for that is important, definitely.
And I think, it's that, isn't it? Knowing that it's okay to ask for that. It's okay to say that you're struggling with it, or that, because you're actually doing something about it. You're not sort of just saying, I don't understand, I don't get it, and that's you. You're saying, I want to understand it, and I think that's
exactly that.
Maybe that's sort of, again, that safe space that you talked about.
One of my close friends, one of my best friends, partners, their parents are not supportive, and it's been horrendous, and it's been so traumatic for them. And they desperately just, I'm sure, wish that their parents would be supportive, but they've actually just had abuse, just horrible. They're a bit older, they're not a young person, but they've just had abuse and just horrible negative outlooks. And I think to have a parent that maybe doesn't understand but wants to understand is so important. So things like mermaids and so on, or doing your research on Stonewall, or doing a training course, maybe that's a good step in the right direction.
I agree.
Even as an adult child, all you want is your parents to love you and be proud of you. That doesn't stop.
No.
I don't think that stops at any age, really. So that means the world to that person. And as a parent, I don't believe that there's any parent out there that doesn't want to love their child. It's just that they might find it more difficult than others at certain times. Thank you for listening. We have only scratched the surface on LGBTQ plus inclusion today. Please check out our description for links to the organisations that we've discussed. And remember, Pride is not just for June. Speak soon.